Hi everyone. In this video, I want to talk a little bit about zero-shot prompting. So when we are using these large language models like GPT 3.5 Turbo and the latest GPT-4 or Cloud or any of these language models that have been trained and that are great at performing all sorts of tasks as we saw in the previous video. When we're doing that, typically the way we prompt these models is by an approach or a method called zero-shot prompting. Now, what do we mean by zero-shot prompting? So here's an example to illustrate what we mean by that, and I will explain in a minute what that actually entails. So I'm going to actually take this prompt, and this is a prompt that I already tested and demonstrated in the previous recording that we did, where we talked about some examples of prompting, and this was a text classification example. So I'm going to take this, it's easier to show in the playground and to kind of demonstrate to you how it works with the GPT 3.5 Turbo model. So this one is doing what we refer to as sentiment analysis. You can also call it sentiment classification. And the idea with this task is that you would pass to the model some input, and then the model would predict the sentiment, if it's neutral, negative, or positive. So what I'm going to do here just to improve this prompt a bit, I'm going to actually add this here. This is it's a prompt that is meant to classify text. So the model will understand that this is that type of task just by looking at the structure and the way you have designed this system prompt. And also by the use of this output indicator, which, as I mentioned in a previous guide, the importance of that. So you can see here that the model predicted this to be neutral, which is the correct label or the correct class for this particular input that we have here. So that looks to be working. And so the question is, how does this model know that it should perform this particular task and classify this input text, right, the input text here, into either of these? How does it have knowledge and understanding of this task? And the reason for that is that this model has been trained on large scale web data, right? But it has also been trained on all sorts of data sets out there as well that might already have examples of, of something that looks like sentiment classification, right? So there are tons of data sets out there. There's a lot of content out there that might already have this structure. The model out of the box kind of understands how to perform the task, right? And for this task, you might not need to do what we refer to as fine tuning or tune the model to perform this task well. So at first glance, right, we see that the model is performing really well. We see that the assistant sent us this neutral. It looks to be working okay. And you can test it out by trying a different input here. So I'm just going to go here and try. I am feeling excited today. Okay. Then I'm going to try it out again. And you can see that this one is positive. So you can see that this model does have some knowledge of this particular task. It knows the sentiment that this input text is eliciting, right? So that's very good to see. Now I'm trying different examples here, but in reality, as a developer, as a researcher, you may need to put together large data sets to evaluate whether this model is doing it correctly. For now, this is autoscope, but this is something we are going to discuss in a later video. We will be publishing something about fine-tuning later down the road, and we will also be using this particular use case. It's a very popular use case, this one of text classification, where we share like how we try different types of prompting techniques and how it compares to something like fine-tuning. I want to go back here. I did mention here in this guide a really important resource here that discusses this idea of instruction tuning. And instruction tuning, basically, you will need something like a prompt response or like an input response where you're training the model to, when the model sees those inputs, it is gonna have a certain type of response, right? So if you're fine tuning these models and the model has something that looks quite similar to this type of task, it will have an understanding on how to perform the task, right? So a lot of these models, they have those zero shot capabilities that we can leverage. And that's really key and important for how we use these models today. So if you use something like ChatGPT, right, when you go there, you're not thinking about, oh, I need to provide the model knowledge or additional knowledge or provide the model examples of how to perform the task. No, you go there and essentially, what you expect as a user is the model to be able to perform that task really well. However, I must say, in reality, a lot of real world applications of large language models require you to put together demonstrations to steer the model better for the results that you want to see. And for that, we have what we refer to as few shot in context learning or few shot prompting. And that's something that we will also be discussing in a future video as well. So, look forward to that. That will be an interesting one as well that we will share with some examples as well. So that's the idea of zero shot, right? So here you can see that I am not really providing the model any examples. And how would that look like if I'm providing examples? Again, we will discuss this in a future video. But for now, that you can see that this model has potentially the capability to do this type of text classification. And in fact, if you go back to our examples that we shared in the previous guide, you will see that there's all these tasks, foundational tasks that we asked the model to perform, right? Like text summarization, information extraction, question answering. If you look at these examples, you will see that there is also, these are all zero shot prompts in the sense that we're not really giving the model any examples on how to perform the task. We're just telling it, here is a piece of text and do something with it, right? Summarize text, extract information, and so on. And we just expect the model to do it really well. The good thing is that a lot of researchers are really working hard for these models to be able to perform really well in the zero shot setting. Realistically speaking, today, it is the case that for some tasks, at least the more common tasks, it will work. So a lot of things like information extraction, the model might be able to do that task, in a zero-shot setting. But in a lot of cases in the real world, when you're deploying models and so on, you may need to consider adding demonstrations and examples to better steer the model to get the results that you really want for your task. So that's a little bit about zero-shot prompting. Hopefully that clarifies a little bit on what it is. If you enjoyed the video or found it useful, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. We'll be posting a lot more new videos about all of these like prompting techniques. And if you have any questions about those, also leave them in the comments. If you have any ideas on videos that you would like to see or maybe a concept that needs further explanation, also feel free to comment on that and I'll be looking at all of those and decide which ones make sense to do a video on. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching the video and see you in the next one.